I put it down when I get ready, and I take it up when I get ready. So there is no question to the biblical centered mind that Jesus couldn't have come down when he was asked. But he stayed. And the question continues, is there a lesson then in the Easter text that we have not yet heard preached as to the significant value and blessing that comes in stay? Particularly in a social environment and in a country where the psychological disposition that is already underwritten in any relationship, and that is, if this doesn't please me, I'm gone. And since you're so quiet on me on Easter, I will say to you that there are many goers in this house. Because there are many people who decided to go. And I have to admit I was one of them. Because we don't always commit so drastically that we don't leave a way out. I want to approach this, however, because I have to ask the question, how does one get there? You want me to stay here, but I need to find out how do I get there. Because it's necessary to understand the ramifications of what it is that put me there, in order for me to grasp the significance of why I ought to stay. There are certain happenings that must take place in order for me to realize within myself that I should be in a certain place. And that something has to move me into that place, and I have to be very sure in my faith standing that this is the place I ought to be. I want you somehow to separate in your mind the circumstance surrounding being there from understanding that you should be there. I work on that. I'll walk over here and just walk around, and maybe it'll come to me over here. Maybe the fish are over here. They're not biting over there. I'm trying to separate the circumstances that bring certain influence from the knowledge of knowing you should be there. To say it another way, if everything was pleasant and wonderful, I should be there. But if everything was horrendous and upheaving and uncomfortable, I still should be there. Because immediately now that removes my being there from the environmental circumstances that surround where I am, to a greater and more divine unction that says, I have placed you there, And it doesn't matter what the circumstances are and the situation is, you are where you should be. It becomes critical now because what it says is that it's not the circumstance that called you. Ooh. And it is not the situation that has placed you within the parameters of where you are. So you're placed and have to deal with lesser issues that are trying to decide the destiny that has been placed in your life by the greater power. I'm simply saying, without going ahead of myself, that many of us have aborted our destinies because of lesser powers. And we have negated our purpose in life. Because when the greater power made the assignment, we allowed the lesser power to abort it. If I make that approach, then we have to consider very seriously what it is that engages me and brings me to the revelation, not the recognition, but the revelation of what it is that the higher power, God, has prefigured and foreordained for my life. What it is that brings me into cognition of what He intends for my life. And when do I come to the awareness or the cognitive awakening to realize that I'm not going to be in the masses who are down there without a cross, but I'm going to be in the select few of those who are up there with a cross. I'm not going to be in the category of those who wag their heads, but I am called to be in the category for folks to wag their heads at me. I wish I could talk to somebody. I am not going to be in the category that has no mission but to try to stop my mission, because I've been brought out of the masses into the singularity of what the purpose of God's will is for my life. Oh, I feel something happen to me now. I got to work with it. Can I work with it? Bring me a stool, please, in case my back hurts too bad. It is critical now because there has to be a connection, and a conscious one, that connects, thank you, the strength of my beginnings into the very place where God would have me, anticipating and expecting robust victory at the end. But the truth is that victory and beginnings are not synonymous. There is always a distance between the ecstatic wonder of the vision and the final outcome of the victory. There is nobody here, and I'm trying to keep my lecture voice before there is nobody here who dreams a dream and has it fulfilled when they wake. The dream necessitates that there is going to be some space between the initial enjoyment of the dream and the fulfillment of the dream. The difficulty is not in receiving the victory at the end, nor is the problem with dreaming the dream in the beginning. Because if there are any two places we celebrate being selected in the beginning, and we celebrate the victory at the end. But the question is, after you've celebrated the victory at the beginning, can you have, as Barry White calls it, staying power to get to celebrate the victory at the end? Because we have selected you to enter into college with a scholarship, and we celebrate and congratulate the fact that you are now in the halls of Harvard, the question becomes, will we celebrate your graduation because we celebrated your entry, or will you abort between the two? Can you stay? Can you stay? And so it is then, I have noticed that whenever there is a calling, and whenever there is a revelation of God placing his hand on somebody, the callings were extraordinarily ecstatic. And the reason they were ecstatic, I'm beginning to discover, is that whenever God moves you into something that's going to be arduous, you have to look back at the calling to make sure that it was God. Because between here and the victory, the road is going to be so tough that you have to have an assurance in your spirit that I didn't make this up. This had to come from God. I think I'm talking to somebody here. And what God does then is he understands the natures of his creatures, so he moves very quickly to give a prophetic word. And if you notice very carefully that everybody in the scriptures that God called to horrendous and magnanimous tasks had previous prophetic words spoken to give them a substratum of their calling so that they could be solid in their footing, knowing they were called of God. Because I've learned that God can call you and you can let men uncall you. And the call of God has to be so stupendous and so magnanimous in its horrendous grab that you know this is of God, to the point where when the trials and the troubles come, you can always look back to the day that God brought you out with such a mighty hand that you can be assured this is of God.